While I was buying bananas, a lady asked, "Is that for your baby monkey?" "Yeah, and the other chimpanzees at my zoo." The old lady kneeled down to my black daughter Aubrey and said, "Aren't you a Weird Al-looking little gorilla?" Then she pulled out her phone and snapped a picture of Aubrey before I could react. Aubrey grabbed my hand tighter as I stepped between them. "Excuse you, please delete that picture." The lady started typing something and said, "You and your mulatto should have known better than to come around here. I'm posting her on Facebook." I screamed, "Do not post my daughter on Facebook, she's only 7. I reached for her phone but she pulled it away, too late. "I'd get back in your car and drive right out of here before the gang comes." She turned and shuffled away, typing on her screen. I wanted to chase after her, but Aubrey tugged on my shirt. "Mommy, I'm scared. I don't want to be here anymore." Her voice was so small. "Me neither. Let's get out of here." I abandoned our cart and speed walked toward the exit. We almost made it when the store janitor blocked our path. "Back to the zoo." His voice dripped with venom. "Back the F up and get back to mopping." I pulled Aubrey behind me. "You don't know where you are, lady." He stepped closer. "I clearly don't know where I am." "Why don't you tell me why this store is so important?" I was shouting now. "You get the hell out now. I have to mop the floor because your filthy daughter walked all over it." He pointed the mop handle at us. I grabbed Aubrey's hand and we ran to the parking lot before things got worse. That's when I saw our car. Every window was smashed. Glass covered the seats and ground. Aubrey started crying for real now as I tried to process what was happening. Another woman was getting into a white SUV holding a spray can. She caught my eye and smiled before speeding off. As her car pulled away, I saw what she'd done. RACET, spray, painted across our hood in red letters. "Quickly get in, baby. Careful of the glass." I helped Aubrey into her booster seat. I turned the key but nothing happened. Tried again. The engine made a grinding sound, then started smoking. Black smoke poured from under the hood as I kept turning the key desperately. We needed to leave now. "Mommy, look out!" Aubrey screamed. Her door flew open. A man in a red cap reached in trying to grab her. I lunged across the console, hitting his arms. He turned his attention to me, came around to my side while I was twisted, protecting Aubrey. My door opened. I saw the fist coming but couldn't dodge it. Trapped in the car, it connected with my jaw, and everything went sideways. My vision blurred, ears ringing. I could taste blood. "Mommy, Mommy, help me." Aubrey's terrified screams cut through the fog. I tried to move but my body wouldn't cooperate. Through blurry eyes I saw multiple people surrounding our car. The man in the red hat was pulling at Aubrey's seatbelt. She was kicking and screaming, fighting with everything her little body had. More hands reached through the broken windows. Someone grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. I swung wildly but couldn't connect. The red hat finally got Aubrey's buckle undone. He started dragging her out while she clawed at the doorframe. Her favorite bluey shirt ripped. One of her twinkle toes fell off in the struggle. "No, please." I found my voice but it was weak. They pulled her from the car. There were multiple people just watching. The old lady from the store was there recording with her phone. The man with the mop, other faces I didn't recognize. All of them watching as they carried my screaming daughter away. I tried to follow but someone pushed me back down. My vision kept going dark. The last thing I heard clearly was Aubrey's voice getting farther away. Then hands were going through my pants. They started feeling me and took my phone and wallet. Someone said something about teaching race traders a lesson. I forced myself to stay conscious, to remember faces, to fight through the pain because they had my daughter. They had Aubrey, and I didn't know what they planned to do with her. The sirens in the distance might have been real, or might have been my desperate imagination. But the empty booster seat with her other shoe was definitely real. They had taken my baby, and even though I was dying, I promised myself to save her if it was the last thing I'd do. The sirens got louder and louder until I knew they were real, and not just my desperate brain making things up. My ribs felt like broken glass when I tried to sit up. But I grabbed Aubrey's fallen twinkle toes from the floor, and held it so tight my knuckles went white. Blood kept filling my mouth, and I had to spit it out the broken window to breathe. 2 EMTs ran over with their bags, and the woman immediately started checking my head while the man shined a light in my eyes. I kept saying the same thing over and over, that my daughter was kidnapped by a mob, and they took her, and we had to find her right now. The man grabbed his radio and called for police backup, while the woman pressed gauze against my head and it came away soaked red. They tried to put me on the stretcher but I fought them because I couldn't lie down when Aubrey needed me. The woman said I could sit up in the ambulance if I let them treat me, so I agreed and started telling them everything I could remember. The man in the red cap had thick arms with a tattoo on his right wrist that looked like barbed wire. The old lady wore glasses on a chain and had gray hair in a bun. The janitor had a name tag, but but I couldn't remember what it said. My words kept getting jumbled and I had to repeat things. At the hospital, they wheeled me into a room where a police officer started asking questions, but my head was pounding so bad I kept forgetting what he asked. He wanted exact descriptions and got frustrated when I couldn't remember if the red cap had writing on it or not. I started doubting myself and wondering if I was remembering anything right at all. A nurse came in holding her phone and showed me a video someone posted online of the attack, but it was edited weird. It started with me reaching for the old lady's phone and made it look like I attacked her first. The comments under it were horrible, with people saying they hoped the mob taught us both a lesson and making threats about what they'd do to Aubrey if they found her. My hand started shaking so bad I dropped the phone. That's when Detective Zuri Chandler walked in wearing a dark suit and took the officer's notebook from him. She explained they were issuing an Amber Alert, even though kidnappings by strangers don't always qualify, but hate crime abductions get special consideration. For the first time since they took Aubrey, I felt a tiny spark of hope that someone was actually going to help. I suddenly remembered the woman with the spray can drove a white SUV and the cap on the paint can was blue, not black like I first thought. Detective Chandler wrote everything down fast and said those details could help them track purchases at hardware stores. She told me she was heading to the grocery store to get their security footage, but warned me the manager already claimed their cameras weren't working that day. The way she said it, I could tell she didn't believe him and had ways to check if he was lying. Nurse Eleanor Grimes came in with evidence bags and started putting my torn shirt and bloody jeans in them. She took pictures of every single bruise and cut on my arms and face and ribs. While she worked, she whispered that she was making sure everything got documented right because she'd seen cases like this get buried. When people didn't want to deal with hate crimes, my phone that I'd forgotten was in my back pocket suddenly buzzed with the emergency alert sound. The Amber Alert was going out across the whole state with Aubrey's school picture and her description. 7 years old, black, 3 feet 8 inches and 60 lb. Last seen wearing a ripped bluey shirt and one pink twinkle toes shoe. Seeing it written out like that made everything too real, and my whole body started shaking because my baby was really gone, and these people had her, and I didn't know what they were doing to her right now. 2 officers walked into my hospital room carrying paperwork and told me they'd towed my car to the impound lot for evidence processing. They handed me forms for insurance claims and said I'd need to contact my provider within 48 hours to start the process. I stared at the papers trying to understand what they meant, while my head throbbed and realized I had no way to get anywhere since my car was gone. My wallet was stolen during the attack, so I had no money for a taxi, or even to buy food from the hospital cafeteria. The officers left after giving me a case number, and I sat there holding useless papers with no phone to even call anyone for help. A woman in a blue blazer knocked and came in holding a recording device and introduced herself as a journalist from the local news station. She pulled a chair close to my bed and asked if I wanted to share Aubrey's story to get more people looking for her. Part of me wanted to scream at everyone to leave me alone, but another part thought maybe if more people saw her face on TV, someone might recognize where they took her. She kept pressing about doing a live interview from my hospital bed, and I couldn't decide if publicity would help or just make things worse for Aubrey. While I was trying to think, Nurse Grimes came back with her phone, looking upset, and showed me my Facebook page, except it wasn't really mine. Someone had made a fake account with my name and profile picture and was posting horrible racist comments about black people deserving what they get. The post had hundreds of angry reactions and comments from strangers saying I was the real monster and deserved everything that happened to me and worse. Death threats filled the fake inbox with people describing what they'd do if they found me and some saying they hoped Aubrey never came back. My hands shook as I scrolled through post after post of hate using my name and face to spread poison while my real daughter was missing. Detective Chandler walked back in carrying a folder and pulled out printed screenshots from the grocery store's security cameras. The images were grainy, but clear enough to see the man in the red cap's face and his barbed wire tattoo on his wrist. Another photo showed part of the woman with the spray can getting into her white SUV, though her face was turned away. She told me their facial recognition software was already running on the clear images, and they should have matches within hours if these people had any prior arrests or government IDs. While she was explaining the process, she got a text and said people online were already trying to help identify the attackers. Someone had posted the old lady's picture from the video in local Facebook groups asking if anyone recognized her. A woman commented that she looked like someone from her church directory at First Baptist, and sent Detective Chandler a photo that might be a match. She immediately dispatched an officer to verify the identity and check if that was really the same person who organized the mob. The doctor came in with discharge papers saying I needed to be admitted overnight for observation because of my head injury and broken ribs. I pushed the papers away and told him I couldn't stay because I needed to be at the police station helping find Aubrey. Detective Chandler stepped between us and suggested a compromise where I could rest in their command post room with a cot so I'd be part of the search but still getting medical attention. The doctor wasn't happy, but agreed to discharge me against medical advice if I signed papers saying I understood the risks. We left the hospital in Detective Chandler's unmarked car and I watched the town pass by wondering which of these normal-looking houses had my daughter inside. At the police station, she set me up in a small room with maps on the walls and a cot in the corner, where I could hear radio chatter about the search. I tried to sleep but kept jerking awake thinking I heard Aubrey crying and had to remind myself she wasn't there. Around 4 in the morning, Detective Chandler's phone rang and she answered it on speakers so I could hear. A nervous male voice said his name was Omar Burton, and he worked tech support at the grocery store. He said he'd been thinking all night about the kidnapped little girl and couldn't sleep knowing he had security footage his manager claimed didn't exist. Detective Chandler told him to bring whatever he had immediately, and 20 minutes later, a young guy in a wrinkled polo shirt met us in the parking lot. His hands trembled as he handed over a USB drive, saying he could lose his job for this but couldn't live with himself if he didn't help. He downloaded all the camera feeds from that day before his manager could delete them, and said there were clear shots of the whole attack. Detective Chandler plugged the drive into her laptop, and we watched multiple angles of them dragging Aubrey away while she fought and screamed. First had to look away when I saw her little body being carried off screen, but Detective Chandler kept watching and taking notes about every person visible. She called her traffic analyst who'd been reviewing cameras all night, and put him on speaker to give an update. He said 3 white SUVs were spotted in the area that day, but one had a partial plate starting with K7 that matched witness descriptions. They were running registration searches on all 3 vehicles, but the partial plate was their best lead so far. Detective Chandler said we could ride along when they checked the addresses, but I had to stay in the police car for my safety and couldn't interfere. I agreed to anything. That meant being part of finding Aubrey instead of sitting uselessly in that small room. We drove through neighborhoods I'd never been to before, where every house looked suspicious, and any of them could be hiding my baby. Requested reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as we turned down street after street following GPS directions to the first address. Detective Chandler parked in front of a small ranch house with an overgrown lawn where the white SUV sat, in the driveway covered in dust. She got out with 2 other officers while I pressed my face against the window, trying to see any sign of Aubrey. An elderly man answered the door using a walker and looked confused when they asked about his vehicle. His daughter came storming out from inside, yelling about police harassment and demanding to know why they were bothering her father, who hadn't driven in months due to his health. Detective Chandler stayed calm and explained they were investigating a child abduction and needed to verify all white SUVs in the area. The daughter kept yelling that this was discrimination and she'd call her lawyer, while her father just looked lost and asked what was happening. I watched my hope drain away as it became clear this wasn't the right vehicle, and we weren't any closer to finding Aubrey than we were hours ago. Detective Chandler's phone rang and she put it on speaker while we drove back toward the station. A shaky voice said they'd heard a child crying yesterday in the duplex on Maple Street where a white SUV had been parked. My chest got so tight I could barely breathe as Detective Chandler called for backup and turned the car around. The duplex sat at the end of a dead-end street with peeling yellow paint and broken shutters hanging loose. 2 police cars were already there when we pulled up, and I wanted to run inside, but Detective Chandler made me wait. The officers went in with guns drawn while I pressed my face against the car window, watching for any sign of movement. They came out shaking their heads, and Detective Chandler let me follow her inside once they cleared it. The place smelled like old cigarettes and spoiled milk. Fast food wrappers covered the coffee table, and a purple hair tie sat on the floor by the couch. Detective Chandler pulled on gloves and picked it up with tweezers to bag it for testing. I stared at that little elastic band, trying to remember if Aubrey had one like it. She had so many hair ties. I couldn't be sure, but the possibility made my stomach hurt. We walked through each room finding more trash and dirty dishes but no other signs of a child. Outside, a man in a torn jacket walked by and spit right on the police car's windshield. He yelled something about us getting what we deserved for bringing trouble to their neighborhood. Detective Chandler arrested him for assault while other people watched from their windows with angry faces. Back at the station, she let me use her laptop to search for information while she processed the arrest paperwork. I found a private Facebook group called Protecting Our Heritage with over 300 members from our area. The old lady's profile was there under Margaret Hutchinson, and she'd posted that morning about teaching someone a lesson. My hands shook as I scrolled through posts full of hate and threats against anyone who didn't look like them. Detective Chandler looked over my shoulder and started taking screenshots of everything. She explained she'd need to subpoena Facebook for the private messages and full member list, but warned it could take days through legal channels, days we didn't have while Aubrey was still missing. My sister called the station crying because she'd gotten terrible messages from my phone number saying awful things about Aubrey. The detective had to explain that my phone was stolen during the attack and someone was using it to hurt us more. They were sending messages to everyone in my contacts saying I was a bad mother who deserved this. A woman named Brew Connor arrived introducing herself as a victim advocate assigned to help us. She had kind eyes and a folder full of resources for everything from medical bills to trauma counseling. First was too tired to argue anymore and let her start making calls to handle the practical stuff I couldn't think about. Detective Chandler said we needed to go back to the grocery store parking lot so I could walk through exactly what happened. My legs felt weak getting out of the car in that same spot where they had attacked us. The broken glass was gone, but I could still see dark stains on the pavement. I showed her where Aubrey's door had been when the man grabbed her and pointed to the scuff marks on the ground. The crime scene. Tech took photos of everything and measured the marks, saying they might have shoe prints that could help identify who took her. The business next door was a dry cleaner and the owner came out when he saw the police cars. He said his security camera faced the parking lot and might have caught something useful. Detective Chandler went inside with him while I waited by the car, trying not to look at the empty spot where they dragged Aubrey away. She came back with a USB drive and plugged it into her laptop right there in the parking lot. The video showed the white SUV clearly heading north after the attack toward the industrial area of town. Detective Chandler immediately got on her radio, redirecting patrol units to search that area. She pulled up more camera footage on her computer from traffic lights and businesses along that route. I watched over her shoulder as she tracked the SUV's path through town, trying to picture where they might have taken my baby. The highway cameras finally gave us something solid, showing the SUV crossing the county line 3 hours after they took Aubrey. Detective Chandler started making calls to coordinate with the sheriff's department, but I could hear the frustration in her voice. They weren't treating this as urgent as we needed them to, and every minute that passed felt like an hour. She kept pushing them, explaining this was a hate crime, kidnapping of a 7-year-old child. The sheriff's department finally agreed to send units to check addresses on their side of the county line. Brooke Connor had been making calls too, and managed to get us a rental car through a victim assistance program. She also contacted my insurance company about the vandalized car and started the paperwork for emergency financial help. I barely heard what she was saying because all I could think about was Aubrey scared and alone somewhere. Detective Chandler's phone kept ringing with tips from people who'd seen the Amber Alert, but most led nowhere. Someone thought they saw the SUV at a gas station, but it turned out to be the wrong one. Another person was sure they'd seen Aubrey at a rest stop, but it was a different child entirely. Each false lead felt like losing her all over again. Detective Chandler hung up her phone and shook her head after talking to the sheriff's department for 20 minutes. They kept saying they needed more evidence before they could help us look for Aubrey on their side of the county line. I wanted to grab the phone and scream at them that a 7-year-old girl was missing, but Detective Chandler told me it wouldn't help. She got back on the phone with their chief while I paced around the command post feeling completely useless. The chief kept saying the same things about jurisdiction and resources, and I could see Detective Chandler getting more frustrated with every word. She finally convinced them to at least check one address, but they said it would be tomorrow at the earliest. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't even hold the water bottle Brooke Connor had given me. Detective Chandler's phone rang again, and this time it was one of her officers, saying they'd found something important. The man in the red cap had rented a storage unit 2 months ago, according to the records they'd pulled. We drove there immediately and the manager opened it for us after Detective Chandler showed him the warrant. The smell hit us, first like old sweat and metal. Inside there were stacks of papers with swastikas and Confederate flags covering the walls. Boxes of ammunition sat next to piles of white supremacist books and magazines. Detective Chandler took photos of everything while her team started cataloging items. There was no sign of Aubrey anywhere, but they found maps spread out on a folding table. Red circles marked different addresses around town, including my apartment building, which made my stomach drop. They also found a list of names with mine at the top and notes about our daily routines. Detective Chandler said this proved he'd been planning something for weeks. In the back corner they found car parts and accessories that looked like they came from the white SUV. There were fuzzy dice and a steering wheel cover that matched what witnesses had described seeing in the vehicle. Detective Chandler bagged everything as evidence, saying it connected him directly to the kidnapping, even though we still didn't know where Aubrey was. My phone started buzzing with messages from people who'd seen the news coverage. Someone had finally identified the old lady from the store video as Margaret Hutchinson, who lived 2 towns over. People were already gathering outside her house with signs demanding she tell us where Aubrey was. Detective Chandler had to send 2 units over there to control the crowd before things got out of hand. Margaret Hutchinson must have called the local news station because suddenly she was on TV from her living room. She sat there, in her floral dress, claiming she was persecuted for being a concerned citizen. She said she'd sue me for defamation and that I was the one who'd started trouble at the store. She admitted taking Aubrey's photo, but said she just wanted to show her prayer group what was happening to their community. The evidence showed she'd posted in that Facebook group minutes before the attack, but she kept denying organizing anything. I threw the remote at the TV screen, but it just bounced off. Detective Chandler's phone rang again, and it was the same person who'd called about the duplex. They said they'd heard crying sounds on a different night too, but hadn't wanted to get involved until they saw the Amber Alert. They mentioned seeing the man in the red cap carrying blankets into a house 3 blocks from the duplex. Detective Chandler immediately started setting up surveillance on that house. She wouldn't let me get anywhere close because it was too dangerous if Aubrey was really there. I had to sit in a police van a whole block away watching grainy footage on a laptop screen. Officers in unmarked cars watched the house from different angles while I felt completely useless just sitting there. Every minute felt like an hour as we watched that dark house for any sign of movement. Detective Chandler kept checking her watch because we needed a warrant to go inside. The judge wasn't available until morning, and without probable cause, we couldn't just break down the door. I begged her to forget the rules and just go in, but she explained that doing it wrong could mean they'd go free later on a technicality. She said she understood how hard it was to wait, but we had to do this right for Aubrey's sake. The surveillance cameras showed nothing for hours except a cat walking across the yard. Then around midnight, a light turned on in an upstairs window for just a second before going dark again. Detective Chandler called for more units to surround the house but told them to stay hidden. I couldn't take it anymore and got out of the van, walking toward the house myself. Detective Chandler caught up to me before I even reached the yard and grabbed my arm. She said she understood, but if I interfered, it could ruin everything and put Aubrey in more danger. She walked me back to the van while I cried from pure frustration. At 2 in the morning, the cameras finally caught movement at the back door. The man in the red cap came out carrying something wrapped in a blanket heading toward a car parked in the alley. Detective Chandler immediately called for entry based on exigent circumstances since a child could be in immediate danger. Units surrounded the house within seconds while others blocked the alley so he couldn't drive away. The red cap man dropped the bundle and tried to run, but officers tackled him in the yard. Officers rushed to unwrap the bundle while others dragged the red cap man away in handcuffs. It was just blankets and pillows but no sign of Aubrey. My legs gave out and I collapsed on the grass, watching them search his pockets and find car keys. Detective Chandler ordered teams into the house while paramedics checked if anyone else was inside. They came out carrying my wallet and phone along with other stuff from our car, including Aubrey's backpack that had been in the trunk. The red capman kept yelling about his rights while they shoved him into a police car. Detective Chandler grabbed his phone from evidence and started scrolling through it right there in the yard. Her face changed when she found something and she called over another officer to look. They showed me messages about moving the package to someone's rural property tomorrow morning. The word package made me want to throw up because I knew they meant my daughter. She had their tech person start pulling addresses from his contact list while marking them on a map. One name kept showing up in the messages about a cousin who owned land outside town. They ran property records and found a farmhouse registered to the janitor's cousin about 40 miles north near the county line. Detective Chandler got on her radio calling for state police backup since it was outside city limits. We loaded into unmarked cars and started driving fast with no sirens so we wouldn't warn them. My hands were shaking so bad I had to sit on them. The farmhouse sat back from the road behind a broken fence and tall grass. As we pulled up, a beat-up sedan suddenly tore out from behind the barn, kicking up dust. 2 patrol cars went after it while others surrounded the property. Detective Chandler grabbed my arm when I tried to get out and told me to stay put for my safety and Aubrey's. The radio crackled that the sedan was heading toward the highway, going way too fast. We could hear the chase over the radio as units called out street names and speeds. Then came the sound we all heard even from where we sat, a huge crash of metal. The pursuing officer radioed that the car hit a telephone pole and the driver was hurt but alive. They pulled the janitor from the store out of the wrecked car, bleeding from his forehead. Paramedics took him away while officers searched through the twisted metal for any clue about Aubrey. Detective Chandler's team finished searching the farmhouse and found kids' food wrappers and a torn piece of fabric that looked like it came from Aubrey's shirt. Back at the station, they put the janitor in an interrogation room once the hospital cleared him. I watched through the one-way glass as Detective Chandler started asking him questions about the attack at the store. He kept saying he didn't know anything about any kid. Then, Detective Chandler asked about his cousin's farmhouse, and he said they never took Aubrey there, which made everyone in the observation room freeze. Nobody had told him her name yet, but he just said it like it was nothing. Detective Chandler pressed harder, asking where Aubrey was right now, if not at the farmhouse. He realized his mistake and asked for a lawyer, but the damage was done. While we waited for his lawyer, Detective Chandler's phone rang with a tip from a gas station clerk. She said she saw the white SUV from the news yesterday and watched them swap license plates with a different car in her parking lot. She only got part of the new plate number, but remembered it started with J7 something. Traffic units immediately started running partial plates while the analyst went through camera footage from that area. Within an hour, they found the sedan on multiple cameras heading east toward the interstate where all those cheap motels are. Detective Chandler realized they might be trying to get Aubrey out of state before the Amber Alert spread further. She mobilized every available unit to check the motel while the analyst kept tracking the car's path. The camera showed it pulling into the Sunset Motel around midnight last night, and not leaving. We raced there in the command vehicle while units set up surveillance positions around the building. I stared at the grainy laptop screen showing the door to room 23 where the car was parked outside. Every few seconds I thought I saw movement, but it was just shadows from passing cars. Detective Chandler sent an officer inside to talk to the motel manager about who was in that room. We watched on the security feed as the manager kept shaking his head and pointing at the office door like he wanted the officer to leave. Then the manager picked up his desk phone and dialed something while looking right at the camera. Within 2 minutes, the door to room 23 opened, and 2 people rushed out carrying bags toward their car. Detective Chandler ordered units to follow them carefully, while she personally arrested the manager for obstruction of justice. He kept saying he didn't want trouble at his motel as they put him in handcuffs. The sedan pulled out heading north with 3 unmarked cars following at a distance. Detective Chandler made a quick decision in the command vehicle and grabbed her phone to call the station. She told them to release the photos of the red cat man and the old lady to every news outlet right away. I watched her send the images from her laptop while explaining we needed public pressure to make them too hot to hide. Within 20 minutes the photos were on every local news site and social media was already sharing them everywhere. My hands shook as I refreshed the police tip line page, seeing the number of calls jumping from 12 to 40 to over 100 read in less than an hour. Most were junk, but Detective Chandler had 3 officers sorting through them looking for anything real. Someone called saying they saw the red cat man at a gas station yesterday, but that was old news. Another person swore they saw him at Walmart, which turned out to be a different guy entirely. Then a call came in that made everyone stop what they were doing. A farmer said he recognized the red cat man as someone who used to own the old Brennan place before the bank took it. He said the property had been empty for 2 years, but he'd seen lights there recently and figured it was kids partying. Detective Chandler pulled up property records on her laptop while I leaned over her shoulder trying to see. The farmhouse was 40 mi north, right where we were heading, and the deed showed it went into foreclosure 18 months ago. She called for every available unit to meet us there, but told them to stay back until we could assess the situation. The sun was just starting to come up as we turned onto the dirt road leading to the property. Detective Chandler had me stay in the command vehicle with an officer while she and her team approached on foot. I pressed my face against the window, watching them move through the tall grass toward the old white farmhouse. The place looked like it was falling apart with boards over some windows and the porch sagging on one side. Detective Chandler held up her hand and everyone stopped moving. That's when I heard it too, a child crying somewhere inside the house. My whole body went rigid and I grabbed the door handle, but the officer put his hand on my arm. Detective Chandler motioned for units to spread out around the building while she stayed near the front with a bullhorn. She clicked it on and her voice boomed across the property, telling everyone inside they were surrounded by police. She said all she wanted was for them to release Aubrey safely and nobody needed to get hurt. The crying inside stopped and everything went completely quiet. Detective Chandler tried again, asking them to just send the little girl out and this could all end peacefully. Still, nothing from inside the house. Minutes dragged by, feeling like hours while we all waited for something to happen. I could see officers positioned behind trees and vehicles with their weapons drawn. Detective Chandler kept talking through the bullhorn, saying they had nowhere to go and needed to think about what was best for everyone. The back door suddenly exploded open and the red Catman came running out carrying something wrapped in a dirty blanket. I knew it was Aubrey before I even saw her face, and I ripped the car door open, breaking free from the officer trying to hold me back. I ran across the field screaming her name while police officers tackled the red Catman to the ground. The blanket fell away and there was my baby, dirty and scared with her hair all tangled but alive. She saw me coming and reached out her arms crying for me. I dropped to my knees and she crashed into me, holding on so tight I could barely breathe. The EMTs were there in seconds, checking her over while she refused to let go of my neck. They said she was dehydrated and had some scrapes but no serious injuries that they could see. She kept asking me if the bad people were gone and if they were going to take her again. I promised her over and over that she was safe now and nobody would ever take her from me again. The police went into the farmhouse and brought out 4 more people in handcuffs, including the old lady from the store. She glared at me as they walked her past, but I didn't care about anything except holding Aubrey. Detective Chandler came over and said they got everyone except the woman with the spray can who must have left when the photos went public. She promised they would find her, but right now we needed to get Aubrey to the hospital for a full check. At the hospital, Brooke Connor from Child Services was already waiting for us. She was calm and gentle with Aubrey, letting her stay in my lap while she asked simple questions about what happened. Aubrey didn't want to talk about it and kept hiding her face in my shoulder. Brooke said that was normal and we would work through it slowly over time. She helped us make a plan for getting home safely and finding a therapist who worked with kids who'd been through trauma. Within hours, the story was everywhere, online and on TV. Someone found our home address from an old social media post and put it on Twitter. Detective Chandler showed me her phone, where people were already posting pictures of our apartment building. She said we couldn't go home right now, and arranged for us to stay at a safe house the department used for witnesses. 3 weeks later, Omar called me from a blocked number. He said people at the store found out he gave the police the security footage, and now he was getting threats at work. His manager wanted to fire him but couldn't find a legal reason yet. He said the grand jury was meeting next week and he was going to testify anyway because he couldn't live with himself if he didn't help put those people in prison. The next week, I sat in the courthouse watching the red Catman walk in wearing a suit instead of the dirty clothes from the farmhouse. Detective Chandler sat next to me, gripping her folder of evidence while the prosecutor laid out why he should stay in jail until trial. The judge shuffled through papers, barely looking up as the prosecutor explained how he'd grabbed Aubrey from my car and carried her to that farmhouse. The defense lawyer stood up saying his client had strong community ties and wasn't going anywhere. I wanted to scream when the judge set bond at $50,000 and the Red Catman's family started pooling money, right there in the courtroom. Detective Chandler's jaw clenched as she watched them count out cash and write checks. Within an hour he walked out the front door of the courthouse while I sat there shaking. Detective Chandler walked me to my car, explaining that they were building a federal case for kidnapping and hate crimes that would put him away for decades. She said the FBI was involved now, and these charges carried 20 years minimum. She showed me the stack of evidence they'd gathered, including Omar's footage and the Facebook posts Margaret Hutchinson made. She promised me they'd get convictions, but warned it would take months of hearings and testimony. That first night, back in our apartment, Aubrey woke up screaming every few hours, reaching for me in the dark. She wouldn't let go of my hand, even to use the bathroom, and followed me from room to room, dragging her blanket. The child therapist came to our place since Aubrey refused to leave and spent an hour just playing with toys on the floor while Aubrey watched from my lap. She told me the nightmares were normal trauma response and we'd work through them together, but those first weeks were brutal. I'd finally get Aubrey to sleep, then hear her crying out for me an hour later, thrashing in her bed. 3 weeks after the rescue, we had to drive past the grocery store to get to the therapist's office. I asked Aubrey if she wanted to take a different route, but she shook her head hard. She said, "That was our store where we bought our bananas and the mean people didn't get to take it away from us." She stared out the window as we passed and I saw her, little fists clenched in her lap, but her chin stayed up. The parking lot looked normal again with cars coming and going like nothing had happened there. A group from First Baptist Church contacted Detective Chandler saying they'd raised money to help us since the news mentioned our car was destroyed. I felt weird taking charity from strangers, but our insurance company was dragging their feet, claiming they needed more documentation about the vandalism. The church people brought a used Honda to our apartment complex with a big red bow on it and a booster seat already installed. Aubrey ran her hands over the seats, checking for glass before she'd get in. They'd raised $8,000 in 2 weeks from their congregation and bought the most reliable car they could find. The pastor's wife hugged me while